What is happening, everybody? It is Saturday afternoon, and because this is a very odd Week 18 slate. I mean, most Week 18 slates are kind of weird, but we've got Saturday football today. So Neil Orfield and I, who, by the way, Neil, former and always Millionaire Maker winner, is going to be with us today. We're breaking down the Saturday games. So we got a 2-game slate. And any questions that you guys have over the course of the show, whether you want to ask us about DraftKings, FanDuel Showdown slates for today, we could build lineups for those. We could answer any questions you have because there's a little bit more flexibility on a 2-game slate, Neil, than when we're talking about the main slate. We've got a lot more to get to. So for today, it could definitely be a little bit more free flowing. I think I said free throwing, which I was like, we're not going to shoot free throws, but we are going to talk about everything there is to know about football for the Saturday games. Answer you guys' question. If you're in Discord, at me, one of the perks being a Stochastic member, you get access to that Discord. And something else you should be doing, Neil Orfield has his own YouTube channel now where he's going to be doing a bunch of best ball content. I assume starting fairly soon, Neil, you're going to be doing stuff for playoffs and also for next year. So, Neil, where can people find your YouTube channel? Because as we were discussing before the show, it is a little bit difficult to find right now.
Yeah, let me go comment in chat so that people can find me from here. I'm going to comment right now. I'm going to put in there comment. All right, so now you can see my name in chat. I believe if you click my name, you should be able to go over to the channel from there. If not, you can just go find my Twitter. I posted it earlier today. So if you go find @PlayerQDFS, I posted out the link to the one video that is on there currently. I'm not sure that this actually works in the comment section, but yeah, that you can find it through my Twitter. It's just my name and my handle is @NCOrfield8K. And yeah, I think hopefully I'll start like next week doing some playoff best ball. If I can figure out, like I got to get my own StreamYard, all that kind of stuff. If I can figure out how to do it on my own, I will start ASAP.
Yeah. So by the way, I figured out how to make it work. I clicked on your name and then from your name. So I posted the YouTube. I was able to post the YouTube handle of yours by clicking on your name and then finding it. So that link that I just posted in Twitter, if you guys or on YouTube chat, copy and paste, then I'll take you to Neil's YouTube page there. But that is, if you want to just find another way to do it, you could click on his name in chat. That might only work on desktop. Maybe that doesn't work mobile. That could be something you'll run into. But either way, I threw that into the YouTube chat, and go check out Neil's YouTube channel if you're looking for best ball content, because Neil loves best ball and he's going to be doing that quite a bit going forward as well. But 2-game slate here, Neil. What kind of takeaways do you have for this 2-gamer, which obviously plays out different than a lot of the slates we typically talk about?
Yeah, it's really interesting. A 2-game slate, particularly with Week 18, with motivations differing across all of the different teams. It really gives you like sort of limited opportunities for like players that you are going to feel confident in when there's teams like, I kind of feel like the Ravens are almost incentivized to lose this game. Like that's an odd thing for an NFL team. Like they're better off probably if they lose this game. Now they're an NFL team. They're competitive. The players on the field are obviously going to be playing to win regardless of what management wants there. But definitely a wrinkle that we have like differing motivations for differing teams in this slate. But it is just 2 games, so we have limited choices here regardless. But yeah, it's just a regular 2-game slate thing. I'm playing more players against the opposing defense. Like I literally don't have any rule for like don't play quarterback or don't play defense against X number of players. I set that to 6 players against my opposing defense potentially. Like I just really don't care about it on a 2-game slate. Trying to think if there's any other. I'm actually less restrictive in my like. I'm not requiring a bring back. I assume I'm going to get a lot of bringbacks anyway in my quarterback stacks. Yeah, opens up a lot playing on a 2-game slate.
Yeah, and we will start to get into it. I see we've already got a question here in the Discord channel. This one is from Hayes Stables. And Neil, we've got Hayes Stables playing into the bid here. He wants to know your exotic play of the day. I've got one right out of the gate. I'm wondering, Neil, do you have a particular exotic play of the day, particularly considering that we do have a white cornerback expected to be drafted in the first round for the first time in NFL history? Were you aware of that?
I am not aware of that.
Yeah, first time ever in NFL history that we could have that. But as people like to troll Eric about the exotic play of the day, the favorite white guy of the slate, do you have one in mind, Neil?
Oh, it has to be a white guy. So I'm not familiar with the bit. Okay.
Yeah, so the basis of the bit, by the way, was one of the first NBA shows that Eric and I did this year. Somebody left a super chat and asked us who the most exotic play of the day was. And Eric answered Peyton Pritchard. which this is not a man that we think of as very exotic. So we've since shoehorned Eric into thinking only white people are exotic. And every question he gets asked for the exotic play of the day is, and we peer pressure him into giving out a white player.
You're gaslighting Eric. Okay.
Yeah, basically, which is what I do. It's a different way for me to gaslight Eric. I need to have at least 15 bits in my back pocket to gaslight him at all times.
Of course, that makes sense. Do they need to be low owned, or is it just any white guy?
Any white guy. I have one in my mind that is low owned though.
Okay, because the first is like Dalton Schultz. I'm playing a lot of Dalton Schultz. He stands out as a white guy that I'm going to be playing. I don't know that I don't think of him as exotic, even from a just like unique player standpoint. Let me see. Are there any other exotic players I guess quarterbacks. We can go to Mason Rudolph at sub 10% ownership.
There we go. That's my guy also. He's got the little added bonus so that it's January 6th today. I think he's ready to rock and roll today, Neil. But most importantly, it is ridiculous to me that we have a 2-game slate here. It's a 2-game slate, and we've got a mass amount of ownership going to both CJ Stroud as well as Gardner Minshew. And then we've got like 10-ish% ownership on just Mason Rudolph as well as Tyler Huntley. Now, I know on paper that Baltimore has a really good defense. I don't know that it matters for this slate, though. Like it's backups that Mason Rudolph is going to be playing against. So I have very uncomfortably contrarian lineups. And by starting with us talking about the quarterbacks, the two I have the most exposure to are Huntley and Rudolph, Neil. And the reasons for that are Mason Rudolph, while he's not good in his own right, he's going to be playing against backups. And then as for Tyler Huntley, this is somebody we've seen with actual fantasy upside in the past. He's got rushing ability. Clearly, he's not Lamar Jackson, but he's in the same archetype as Lamar Jackson, where we can expect him to be able to run the football. So we've got a 2-game slate. Football's a game with a lot of variance to it. And to me, one of the easiest ways to differentiate is just by going to lower owned players at a position where fantasy production is not all that correlated to how good players actually are. So Tyler Huntley and Mason Rudolph, I'm going with them as my 2 most rostered quarterbacks today, Neil.
I think that's sharp, to be honest. I'm going to have a lot of both Tyler Huntley and Mason Rudolph. Rudolph in a must-win game for Pittsburgh, I imagine, will be throwing a good amount. Huntley just, like, as I said, like, there are varying motivations. Baltimore should want to lose. That doesn't mean that Tyler Huntley wants to lose. I imagine Huntley is going to be out there slinging it, hopefully running a little bit. And he clearly has elite upside from he can do it on the ground and through the air, and neither of them getting any ownership. It's kind of wild to see how condensed the ownership is among the quarterbacks. So yeah, I'm with you. I like Huntley and Rudolph as being just an easy way to get contrarian with players who I think have, close to the same upside as the choppier quarterbacks.
Yeah, and people asking, well, what about the weather? It's true. The weather's not supposed to be great. It's supposed to get some rain. There's also supposed to be some wind involved. Here's the thing, though. This is still, once again, only a 2-game slate. And there has to be an ownership where it's so low that it offsets some of the shitty weather situations. And to me, when there are teams, and once again, only a 2-game slate, and you have 4 quarterbacks to choose from on the entire slate, and the entire field is decided, like 80% of the field is playing CJ Stroud or Gardner Minshew, whereas we only have 10% of the field playing Huntley, 10% of the field playing Mason Rudolph. By the way, I mean, a total, it's like 50% of the field playing Stroud, 30% playing Minshew, and like 10% Huntley, 10% Rudolph. So yes, the weather is not good. Yes, that hurts their projection, but I think the ownership is overcompensating for that.
Yeah, 100%. Agree with you there.
And the other thing too that I think people should kind of understand, especially the way that I'm building lineups using our data and the sims, it's, we're looking at a range of outcomes. I'm not sitting here telling you this is who I think is going to be the best player on the slate. If I was doing that, CJ Stroud is a no-brainer at quarterback. I'm just telling you to play the guy who's the best. But I think that the 50+% projected ownership on CJ Stroud is just a little bit too high. So that's the reason why. But totally understand why people look at the weather and say, like, I don't want anything to do with it. But once a certain amount of people say they don't want anything to do with the weather, it kind of makes it more appealing in a weird way, where if this was, as dumb as this sounds, Neil, if this was a neutral weather game, I probably would get to less of Huntley and Rudolph because they'd be more popular.
Yeah, no, people tend to overvalue weather. Like, people really want to factor it in, and like, it's factored into the Vegas totals already. So like, it's already factored into projections. You don't need to double count weather. So I think that it is sharp to just be like, all right, if the field is going to overreact to bad weather, I'm just going to play it straight and just play the guys and hope that the weather isn't as big of a factor as the field is playing it. So I agree. I think that because of the low ownership, the lower owned quarterbacks become great plays.
And I do see that we have a question from our guy Ace of Spade. He wants to know our favorite options for DK tiers. And I do have a question for Ace of Spade. I assume you mean for today's slate, but I'm not positive that you mean today's slate and not tomorrow. So I'm going to answer for today's slate. But if you did mean for tomorrow's slate, that is my bad. And I will rerun lineups and do it for tomorrow's slate instead. But as far as today's slate goes, when we're looking at tiers, and also keep in mind that tiers is, not necessarily like exactly as sharp as what I would consider like the main slate or like single entry fields to be. So let's go ahead and look at this from a tiers perspective, where at least in tiers, we also don't have to worry about pricing at all, Neil. We've got CJ Stroud, Gardner Minshew, and Mason Rudolph. Considering those are the options tiers, like I would go CJ Stroud, where we don't have to. And oh, cool. Ace of Spade followed up and said today. So there we go. So tier 1, I'm going to go CJ Stroud. Tier 2, we have Michael Pittman, Nico Collins, Jonathan Taylor, and Devin Singletary. I'm going to go with Michael Pittman. Now, I know that he's not one of the pass catchers directly of CJ Stroud, but there's still some correlation with him as a run back there. So I'm going to go with Michael Pittman in tier 2. Tier 3, that is Najee Harris for me. Tier 4, this is where it kind of gets weird, Neil. I'm going to ask you, and I know we don't talk a ton about tiers, and I don't think we've done, you and I, any tiers related questions for football. We do have in tier 3, Najee Harris projected with the best projection by like a kind of decent margin. Then same in tier 4 with Jaylen Warren. Would you be hesitant to play them in the same tiers lineups, keeping in mind that if you go from Jaylen Warren to somebody else, you're looking at probably like a 4 or 5 fantasy point downgrade in projection?
Yeah, I'm looking at what is Deontay Johnson's projection? Yeah, honestly, no, I don't have an issue playing them together. Again, they're playing against Baltimore's backup defense. Probably a lot of people don't want to play them together, so I don't think I have an issue playing Najee and Jaylen Warren together.
Tier 5, that is going to be Dalton Schultz. So there's your correlation option with CJ Stroud, as I like that we're getting to tier 5 is Dalton Schultz there. Tier 6, I've got Robert Woods. And what's interesting? I can't remember this ever being the case before, Neil. We've got defenses in tier 6 of the tiers. But it also goes to show that there's kind of like a limited amount of people to get to here. But would you consider the defenses, or would you look at Robert Woods? Is there anything else that seems appealing to you here?
I would definitely consider the defenses. I mean, in terms of projection, they're actually very similar. Robert Woods projects just over 8 fantasy points. Steelers defense is right at 8 fantasy points. Ravens defense 7.34. So they're just a little bit behind. Like, it wouldn't be that shocking to see all of these like skill position players do nothing. I mean, Melvin Gordon, Robert Woods, Nelson Aguilar, Kylan Granson, some plays that I like for GPPs. But in terms of playing tiers, I feel like they're going to be the chalkier side of things rather than the defenses. So yeah, I would definitely consider playing defenses over these options. And I'm trying to decide which defense would be my favorite. Probably not playing the Colts defense, even though it's probably going to be the most contrarian. Probably not playing the Texans defense. It's probably going to come down to Steelers versus Ravens for me. And I think my lean is actually to play that backup Ravens defense, just because Mason Rudolph is not very good. So yeah, I think that they're very much in play.
People in chat asking, is Woods playing today? So Robert Woods is officially listed as questionable, and we don't know for sure. I do think it's going to cause him to go way under owned today, which is kind of interesting because there are a bunch of injuries to the Texans wide receivers. So I do think one of the ways that you could really differentiate a Texans stack would be CJ Stroud and go to Robert Woods as a stacking option, because he's going to be going way under owned in my opinion. But as far as Robert Woods goes, he's listed as questionable. Here's one thing that I think is a benefit for him. Noah Brown was also listed as questionable, and he's already been ruled out. So the fact that Robert Woods is questionable but hasn't been ruled out, I think probably gives a little bit more confidence for me in his status. I don't know for sure, but if we do end up finding out that Robert Woods can't play, then yeah, we are going to have to make some alterations and do some late swaps to our lineups. But do you have a stronger lean on what's going to happen with Robert Woods being listed as questionable?
Not really. I have no real lean. It is going to obviously affect things quite a bit, because if he plays, he's going to be a really intriguing play. If he doesn't go, we're going to have to consider some of the other pass catchers a little bit more than we already are. But I don't think that I have any kind of real lean. Let me see if I can find any better info that'll give me more of a lean.
Yeah, he did not practice at all this week, as some people in YouTube have also pointed out here. Which
I think I'm actually leaning toward he won't sit. Just reading that they elevated Johnny Johnson from the practice squad, hasn't practiced all week. It is a game that they need to win, but I think that I'm slightly leaning toward he will sit. In which case you would need to adjust if he's in your lineups.
And now here's the other side of it, and we'll talk more about wide receivers as we go. But no issue with the show being a little bit more free flowing, with it being just a 2-game slate, and we'll see what comes up as far as questions go. If Robert Woods is ruled out, who would you see benefiting that we should want to play from a DFS standpoint? Because normally, I mean, Robert Woods himself isn't somebody we want to play. So why would Robert Woods being out matters? Well, it matters for a 2-game slate where it's primarily backups playing anyway. So who should we be looking at if Robert Woods doesn't play?
Yeah, so we're already playing Nico Collins, so I want to just throw that out there. Like, I'm not including him because we're already playing him. John Mechie, I think, would be the most obvious. He is min priced. He ran 50% of routes in week 17. I think that he would be the next man up. He'd be the wide receiver 2 for the Texans if Robert Woods sits. Xavier Hutchinson, I also think, would be very much in play. He would then become the wide receiver 3, I think, for the Texans. 32% route participation last week. I'd expect that to maybe double or so if Robert Woods is out. Obviously, I don't know. Like, we're guessing kind of at what's going to happen here if Robert Woods is out. But I would then rank the Texans receivers: Nico Collins, John Mechie, Xavier Hutchinson, in order of like their opportunities and likelihood of success.
See what we've got as far as questions go. I see some other super chats that have come in. After Ace of Spade, we got Chris Williams, our Apple friend. He has said, no question, just saying I appreciate you guys for the great content. Sorry, been MIA. Got destroyed with COVID here, still recovering, so been gone all week. And then he also gifted out 5 YouTube memberships. So Chris, thank you for the support. And then also, I hope you feel better. I know that Neil also has had COVID a couple times that I can remember over the last couple of years. I apparently am immune because I've never gotten it. But I think, what I think the real reason for that is, Neil, is I don't leave my room or my office very often. So I don't come in contact with, I don't come in contact with other human beings really at all, which is a pretty easy way to not contract any kind of viral illnesses. Is you don't have any friends, and then you're good to go. Is that something you've considered at all?
Maybe going forward, I'm gonna ditch the friends, because the 2 times that I have had COVID, I can pinpoint specific events. The first was a friend had a super spreader wedding where like everybody got COVID at the wedding, and the second was at a Timberwolves game. So when I get to big social settings, that's where I have gotten COVID in the past. Also want to say sorry to hear about your friend Chris. He followed up saying, first of all, his fever got up to 106, which is insane, but also that his friend didn't make it, turned sepsis, and went into cardiac arrest. So really sorry to hear that, Chris. Sorry to hear about your friend, and hopefully you feel better soon.
Yeah, very sorry to hear that. I missed that follow-up there. So, Chris, thoughts with you, your family, and your friend as well, and hopefully you feel better soon. And also, I feel bad that he apologized for not being in YouTube and leaving more super chats. And then he's like, I've been deathly ill. I'm sorry I couldn't make it. It's like, yeah, don't worry. It's okay. Yeah. It's we're not sitting here being like, oh, where's Chris? We need Chris around here. Like, heal up. Let's see what else we got here. Chris Ostra wants to know, can you guys run a Sims for the FanDuel Showdown Pittsburgh Baltimore? Yes. Jacob, could you do me a favor? And yeah, it is Sims and FanDuel for Pittsburgh Baltimore. And they'll pull up some of these results on screen, and we'll see what it is that's standing out there. Next couple of questions here are our first super chat from Sam Pierce. He says, Gordon, Edwards, or Hill? Who's the best running back on DK from the Ravens? Let's see, what do I
Probably
have?
Gordon would be the one that I have the most interest in, just because, like I said, the Ravens really have no incentive to win this game. They've already cemented the bye week. So I would think that Melvin Gordon is the likeliest. Like, if anybody is going to get significant run of these Ravens running backs, it seems like it would be Melvin Gordon over Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, just because Gus Edwards and Justice Hill are such a big part of their offense already. So my lean is Melvin Gordon. But again, it's always hard to know what the coaches are actually going to do.
This is a weird situation where, first of all, I mean, the Ravens, every running back the Ravens have signed this year has seemingly gotten hurt at some point, starting with J.K. Dobbins to open the year. What, he tore his Achilles, was in week 2 or was it week 1?
It was week 1.
Week 1. Yeah. So he's been hurt the entire year, and then they've had subsequent injuries in the backfield. And now we're at a point in the game where they're playing backups. So it's kind of hard to know. this is my least favorite backfield situation of the entire slate. And it's hard to get me to dislike a backfield situation more than what the Steelers have going on. But I'm underweight to the field on Melvin Gordon. That's where the field's going. Gordon's projected for 15% ownership. I have him in 10% of my lineups right now. And I am finding it hard to get to Justice Hill and Gus Edwards because they all have a price tag to them. Gus Edwards is $6,100. Justice Hill is $5,300. So I think the guy is going to be Melvin Gordon, but it's hard to expect him to play like a massive workload or anything like that. So Melvin Gordon is my favorite of the three, but that's really not saying much.
Yeah, he is getting some ownership, which really does take away. Like I was thinking, like if he's going to be really low owned, I love that, but he is getting some ownership, so he's not like some huge priority. But yeah, I think that you laid it out well. Like it's he's definitely my favorite. I'm playing a good amount of Melvin Gordon. You're playing 10%. I'm playing like 20%. It looks like currently, but still not like not a huge endorsement there that we're playing that much.
Somebody in chat saying that Hill has incentives. Here's one of the issues I have with the incentives, and that was what is it? Mr. D Go Blue brought it up in our Discord channel, and when it comes to some of the incentives, right? It doesn't mean that I think that there's like no chance he plays. Like he could certainly have a decent game. But at the same time, too, he's $5,300. There are other running backs that are priced around, and there's a lot of other running backs the Ravens want to get touches to. And what are they going to prioritize? Like Justice Hill is somebody who's actually a part of their normal running back rotation. Presumably, they want him to be healthy for the playoffs. And are they willing to risk a running back injury when they've already had other running back injuries? I'm not willing to play him at $5,300 just because he has contract incentives.
So my only pushback, the only reason I'm like maybe is because we have him coming in at sub 1% ownership. So that then it becomes like, well, maybe we should, like, we're assuming that that's not going to be a huge factor, but like because of the low ownership, it's like, well, maybe they will give him some opportunities. And like, just because he has not a huge incentive, like maybe he breaks off a run. So it's he's in play, I would say. I guess it's at this low ownership, like if you want to play 2% Justice Hill, like I totally no issue with that, or even 5%. If you want to play him one of your 20 lineups, like or if you have higher risk tolerance, you can play more, but it's unlikely to hit. But it's at least interesting that he is coming in at virtually zero ownership, and you can make a case for reasons that he would want to be out there.
See what else we have as far as questions go. We got a super chat here from my filler arc, and as per usual, he has misspelled the names of all the players involved here. This is Naji Harris. Even my filler art couldn't find a creative way to misspell Harris, though. But Naji is spelled like Najee Marshall, Naji. And then Singletary is spelled single, and then Terry, Trrry. So my filler art, thank you for the super chat. Thank you for keeping the bit going as well. Naji Harris or Devin Singletary. We've got these guys projected for 63% ownership for Devin Singletary, 34% for Naji Harris. Neil, between Devin Singletary and Naji Harris, which way are you leaning for today's slate?
I think I'm leaning to Devin Singletary. He's just been such a bell cow for the Texans. He's, they've been in some blowouts, so he hasn't been playing like the fourth quarter, but in general, he seems to be their guy. It is, and Najee Harris clearly splitting carries with Jaylen Warren, so slightly in toward Devin Singletary for me. How about you?
Yeah, so for me, I'm also going with Devin Singletary, and he is expected to be quite popular. I'm about even with the field on Singletary. He's projected for 63% ownership. He's in 2/3 of my lineups. Najee Harris is only projected for 34% ownership, but he's only in 20% of my lineup. So given the fact that I do have a lot more of Devin Singletary, I'm also about even with the field on him, whereas I'm underweight to field on Najee Harris in favor of Jaylen Warren for the umpteenth time this year. It never goes well. Really at all when I've rostered the Steelers running backs, but it's really hard to avoid them on a 2-game slate. As many times I swear off this running back situation, Neil, it keeps roping me in because they're on showdown slates, They're on 2-game slates, and then they're unavoidable, even though I weeks ago decided I can't ever get them right. I should probably be done guessing and play other running backs in more stable situations, and there's nothing I could do on a 2-game slate. So anyway, though, Devin Singletary, that is my answer for this one. And we're caught up on the super chat. So let's go back into, actually, Jacob, do we have the sim done for the showdown? I
think you sent it.
Oh, okay. I'll pull this up. And can you put it on screen too? All right. Where is it? Oh, here we go. Well, lots of screenshots. Okay. So this is for FanDuel. for the showdown slate. And this was the question that came to us from Chris Ostra in the YouTube chat. So first off, we've got here our top projected lineups for showdown. And the number one overall lineup here by Simulated ROI, Neil, it has our dear friend Mason Rudolph in the MVP spot with Gus Edwards, Tyler Huntley, Pat Freiermuth, and Najee Harris. So that is our number one overall projected lineup by Sim ROI. And looking through these lineups, let's see which way is our ownership leaning. 2-3 in favor of Pittsburgh, 4-2. I'm just trying to figure out like our exposures. Looks like our top lineups favor a little bit more toward the Pittsburgh side of the game. So you guys are building lineups for FanDuel. It looks like we're getting to more like 3-2 Pittsburgh lineups as opposed to favoring the Baltimore side of the game. And then if we look at our individual player exposures, starting with, let's see, here we go. All right, so it starts with Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph is in about half of our lineups in the flex spot, Neil. Well, it's about even with the field. That's what the field is doing as well. Although with that said, we are well overweight to the field to Mason Rudolph in the MVP spot. 27% of our top lineups with Mason Rudolph in that MVP spot compared to 18% pool ownership. So for this game, Neil, people were all concerned about the weather. There's nothing you can do about it on a one-game showdown slate. You have to play that game. You can't fade a team because of bad weather on a one-game slate. But do you think the game script could be altered? Could we see a more run-heavy attack from Baltimore and Pittsburgh, considering the game script? And even though I said before that I'm not really sure what to make of the Baltimore Ravens running backs, I do think the game could set up to be a little bit more run-friendly. But the way I think that really could benefit is with Tyler Huntley and his ability to run the football. So that's how I like to attack the Baltimore running game. And he is our second overall most rostered player here. But from the Steelers side of the game, does that make it more viable to play Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren together? The fact that we could see Pittsburgh running the ball a little bit more?
I feel like I've said like twice in the past 3 weeks that it's viable to play the Pittsburgh running backs together, and it has not worked out. But yeah, it's definitely viable on a 2-game slate. Once again, it's probably not going to work out, but you only have so many options on a slate this size.
Yeah.
They both have good opportunities, and again, Pittsburgh needs to win this game. If they do get off to a lead, they probably don't want to put it in Mason Rudolph's hands. I know I said earlier like Mason Rudolph could be slinging it in this game. It's more likely actually that they just want to pound it out because they want to win this game, and they're probably better off going to their running backs rather than putting it in Mason Rudolph's hands. So, I mean, last week, these two running backs, 40 total carries in that game last week with 4 targets also. They have the volume, and it's a 2-game slate. So totally no issue playing them together.
And also related to this game, if you look at the other exposures, the players that were most overweight to in this game, Huntley in the MVP spot, and nearly half of our lineups if Huntley is the MVP. I think he's pretty clearly the best overall MVP to get to. He has a lot of rushing upside, just kind of repeating some of the talking points we've gone over, but rushing upside for Tyler Huntley. And then also just the fact that, he's going up against, this game is going to feature a lot of backups in it, more so on the Ravens side. But still, I mean, this is a very fantasy viable quarterback in Tyler Huntley. Field isn't getting to him quite as much as they probably should. And then also we're getting overweight to the Ravens defense as well. Kind of interesting that people aren't playing the Ravens defense a ton for that slate. But let's see what else we have as far as questions. Thank you for the super chat, by the way, Nick. We appreciate it. Let's see what else we have as far as questions in Discord, if any. If not, we can go through some more of our exposures position by position. But here it is. Legru 50 is asking us, with Odell Beckham and Flowers out, do we feel confident in Bateman/Aguilar playing the whole game, or will they go deeper in the roster like Tylan Wallace as a contrarian punt play? So, all right, a couple parts to this, Neil. First, Rashad Bateman or Nelson Aguilar, do you expect either of them to play the entire game?
I wouldn't expect it. I don't think they have the incentive. Again, they have no reason to want to win this game. They actually have some reason to potentially want to lose this game for better matchups in the playoffs. I know that Aguilar, though, does have incentives. He needs 58 receiving yards today to reach 400 for the season, which would trigger a $250,000 incentive. So we talked about it before the show a little bit. Like, I'm usually not a huge fan of caring about player incentives, but this one does seem attainable, and it might be a little bit more likely that Nelson Aguilar is out there saying, hey, I want to get out there, get 58 receiving yards. And as long as he's on the field trying to get there, he would be obviously has opportunities to score fantasy points. So if I were going to play one of them and think that they might get good run, it would be Nelson Aguilar. Probably you shouldn't be factoring in these player incentives, but that is one that's like, yeah, it seems reasonable at least. Like that's a close enough to get to it that like you could, if you want to factor that in, there's some possibility he's out there for longer than he should be chasing that incentive.
Yeah, I saw somebody on Twitter, I can't remember who it was, bringing up that not only the yardage bonus, Neil, but also 10 receptions, and he hits like another. That one seems like a
that would be
stretch.
Funny. Just like throw like lateral passes.
Yeah. The other thing I think that's kind of funny about some of these incentives are people like, oh my God, this guy gets $1 million if he gets 220 yards this week.
Right.
If he's good enough to get 220 yards for $1 million in one given week, he would get way more than $1 million if he did it every single week. He'd just do it every week if you need these incentive bonuses, because then you'd be a massively valuable player and you get paid like $20 million a year. So some of these players also are probably just not good enough to reach some of what their incentives are there. We've got one of my favorite YouTube, new people in YouTube. I don't know if you've seen this one yet. Have you seen Josh Englewoman?
I have not seen Josh. That's a great name, though. That's a great name.
Yeah. Somebody made an account, Josh Englewoman, and then their profile picture, it's Josh photoshopped into a wig. So that is one where if somebody creates something that funny in YouTube, like there's no way for me to overlook what it is that they say in the YouTube chat. But got Josh Englewoman saying that Justice Hill needs 118 rushing yards versus the Steelers to reach 500 for the season and $250,000 incentive. If he's, that keen on getting 113 rushing yards, he probably should have gotten more than 373 in the first, 16 games of the season. That's where I stand on it.
That would have been a better idea probably to get some of those earlier rather than waiting to have your best game in week 18.
So let's see what else we have coming to us here. Oh, also the other part of LeGrew's question. So do we feel confident in Bateman or Aguilar playing the entire game? No. But with that said, what's different about these guys compared to Justice Hill? Bateman's $3,600. Aguilar is $3,300. Between the two of them, I prefer Aguilar because he is, as dumb as it sounds, this is how week 18 goes. He's lower on the depth chart than Bateman in normal situations, which means that he's ahead of them for this particular sort of scenario. So with that in mind, if I have to play Aguilar or Bateman, and I do have some exposure to Aguilar, Aguilar only project for 3% ownership. I actually do think that he's a viable contrarian option who could potentially get actual run today. So Aguilar is a punt play that I do like getting to. And then the other question he asked is, will they go deeper their roster with somebody like Tylan Wallace? I also have some Wallace exposure, not significant, only a couple of lineups. But of those players you mentioned, Bateman, Aguilar, Wallace, I like Aguilar the most. Is Aguilar somebody that you get to, Neil, or is there somebody else as a punt play from the Ravens wide receiver core that you like getting to?
Yeah, I think I'm with you that it is Aguilar that I like the most. Tylan Wallace, he was not inactive. I don't remember seeing him on the inactive. So yeah, he would probably be, that's a totally fine. If you want to go there, take a shot. Laquan Treadwell is actually, I think I would put ahead of Tylan Wallace just based on our projection. We have Treadwell projected a little bit better. So yeah, for me, it would be Aguilar, probably number one of the Ravens receivers, followed by Laquan Treadwell, followed by Tylan Wallace.
All right, let's see what else we have. I think we've gotten all the super chats we have. Einsteinium asked us a question in the Discord channel, which is, which of these tight ends do we prefer today, Neil? Kyler Granson or Mo Alley Cox? That is Granson for me. Actually, Kylan Granson. Granson is my third most rostered tight end on the slate. I didn't do anything crazy at tight end. I've got Schultz as my most rostered guy, followed by Freiermuth, and then Granson, where I'm really getting crazy contrarians with my quarterbacks. For yourself at tight end, Neil, Granson or Mo Alley Cox?
Yeah, it's also Granson for me. He projects a little bit better. He's only slightly more expensive, and he's also, I guess he is getting 22% ownership, so maybe I need to think about this a little bit more. Let's see. Last week, Kylan Granson, 48% rep participation, Mo Alley Cox, 36%. I don't know. I can see the case for Mo Alley Cox just because he is lower owned. Like we're getting virtually zero ownership to Mo Alley Cox, so I'm actually, I think I'm going back on it. I'm thinking about whether I actually want to play at this ownership because we have just 12 routes run last week for Kylan Granson, 9 for Mo Alley Cox. Like it's not like he's doubling up on the route participation. Mo Alley Cox, obviously a huge, like great end zone target. So it's not that tall. Clear. Yeah, he is 15 feet tall, exactly. Granson, so I'll put it this way. Granson would be the much more likely to hit a nice game. But Mo Alley Cox is a pretty interesting contrarian option.
Yeah. So for myself, and by the way, I'm underweight to the field on Granson relative to ownership. The tight end I like the most is Pat Freiermuth. The entire field is playing Dalton Schultz. So for our projected ownership, we have Dalton Schultz projected for 80% ownership today. So that is where all of the field is going. So for me, I have 33% Pat Freiermuth. I'm actually double the field on Freiermuth considering what his projected ownership is. So that kind of is where I'm getting contrarian. We've got Charlie Kolar's projected for 8% ownership. One thing I am interested to ask you about, because I've seen some people in the YouTube chat bring up Isaiah Likely, and I don't envision him playing it. I know that he is technically normally the backup tight end for the Ravens, but now he's been thrust into a more prominent role. I can't imagine, as well as he's played for them lately, they're gonna risk him getting injured. So maybe play some snaps here. But Isaiah Likely, not really somebody I'm keen on playing. So Charlie Kolar, if I had to play a tight end from the Ravens, I'd be more apt to play Kolar than I would to play Likely. And I do wonder if people are going to play Likely anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and I'm with you. I think like this is a team with Super Bowl aspirations. Isaiah Likely probably not going to be out there for very long. Probably not going to play a ton in this game. We're only projecting him for sub 3% ownership, at least in the latest run that I'm looking at. So we're not expecting him to get a ton of ownership, but it also wouldn't be that surprising if people who are just hand building see the name Isaiah Likely, like, yeah, I'll play this guy. So yeah, I think Charlie Kolar to me is the more interesting one, who is more likely, I think, to be on the field for most of the game. So he would be my preferred Ravens tight end.
Yeah, and right there, Eric Lindquist, his favorite position in football is tight end. Eric shows up in the chat and he goes, ISU legend Charlie Kolar. Yeah, one of the more exotic players on the slate, Eric, Charlie Kolar. So I'm sure that Eric will be very heavily exposed to Kolar today. And I saw some messages too, if I'm not mistaken. Did Eric put something in here? Yeah. So I see in our Odd Shopper Discord channel, I'll read off a message from Eric. He said, books are cowards. I just want to bet Kolar props to the moon. This is fucking bullshit. So I assume there are now, because unlike Eric, I don't just look to see what white backup tight ends props are on sports books, which I assume is what makes up like 8 hours a day for Eric or something like that. So I didn't know that there was no props being posted by Charlie Kolar. But if you guys want access to more of the bets that Eric is going to be giving out for today, sign up at Odd Shopper using the link we have below, and you can use the promo code Lindy. Lindy to get yourself 20% off when you sign up at Odd Shopper for the first time. Just use the promo code in that link that we have below. Get access to our Discord, so you get access to our market-based betting algorithm, expert picks from people like myself and Eric, and then also our Discord channel where we post some extra bets and also sweat the bets and answer some questions you guys have. And then also somebody in chat, Ryan Stubbs, wants to know, are we going to be covering NBA today? Not on this show, but yeah, there's going to be NBA Live before lock later tonight with myself and EMAC. EMAC and I get to do 2 shows. This is Christmas for me today. I did the strategy show with EMAC this morning, and then doing live before. I don't get to spend that much time with EMAC. It's fantastic. So yeah, I'll be on with EMAC later on in the day. Let's see what else that we have as far as questions are concerned. And if there aren't any, we could talk about our overall running back exposures, Neil, because we haven't gotten to that. But we do have a question here. This is from Hayes Stables asking for a single game showdown cash game. Oh my God. So this is the pure degeneracy, Neil. Playing showdown cash games for week 18 here. This is Hayes Stables. I appreciate the hell out of you for this. And then is asking Boswell or Deontay Johnson for the game. Now I'm going to have to go Deontay Johnson over Boswell, but which way do you go?
Yeah, I think I lean that way too. It is a must-win game for the Steelers. So you'd think that Deontay Johnson should be a focal point for them. So yeah, I think I'd go Deontay Johnson.
All right. What else do we have as far as questions? It looks like we're all caught up here, which we are. So Neil, let's talk more about our running back exposures. And we've kind of done like a pretty good overview of the entire slate, but we haven't gone like a deep dive into our exposure to each individual position. And talked about quarterbacks, but now at running backs, I find it very difficult to get away from Jonathan Taylor. Is that the case for you as well?
Yeah, I think he's just going to be the bell cow here for the Colts in a great spot against the Texans. he is getting to 65% ownership. So, and he is 1,300 more expensive than the next most expensive running back on the slate. I still think like I'm probably going to be close to the field. I'm not doing anything too different than the 65% that the field is getting to.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so for me, I mean, that's my most rostered running back on the slate for me, Jonathan Taylor. It's in order: Jonathan Taylor 1, Devin Singletary 2, Jaylen Warren 3. Nothing crazy there, but I think that's a reasonable way to go on this slate. You can get different at quarterbacks, you get different with some of your wide receivers. Running back, not really a place that I'm getting crazy different, but is your top 3 most rostered running backs as well Neil, Taylor, Singletary, and Warren?
Sure is.
Cool. So we're on the same page with that. We got a question from Einsteinium in the chat, and I realized as I'm answering his question, I might have misspoke on something before. He asked, is Treadwell the best 3K wide receiver today? And Treadwell is the Ravens wide receiver I get the most exposure to. But before I kind of meant like if I'm taking a punt on a contrarian cheap wide receiver from the Ravens, I'd be more apt to go to Nelson Aguilar. As far as the more popular guys go, yeah, I think Treadwell is a pretty solid option at min price. I feel good about his playing time. So yeah, I do think that if you were playing like a cash game today and you could only roster one flat 3K wide receiver, the guy I would go to is Laquan Treadwell. Neil, flat 3K min salary. Is Treadwell the guy that makes the most sense to you, or is there somebody else you like for min salary?
It's between Treadwell or the Texans guys, and that those guys are more dependent on Robert Woods being out. So if Treadwell is out, then suddenly I think probably John Mechie would be my favorite of the min price guys. So it's a little bit tough to answer without knowing whether Robert Woods is going to play. I think, going to hold out more roster spots for those Texans receivers, which is I'm not going to play a ton of Treadwell, but I think that it comes down to those 3 as my favorites: Treadwell, Mechie, and Hutchinson.
And what are you doing to reserve spots in your lineups? Like, is there any sort of specific way that you're creating your lineups that's going to enable yourself to have more flexibility? Is it just putting Mechie into lineups? Is it putting Robert Woods into lineups? How is it that you're going about preparing for that?
So I'm actually on this slate. I have a salary cap set. So I set my salary cap at 49,000 for this slate, which I don't always do for a 2-game slate, but I'm testing out whether it's a way to get unique. But also I am doing that. And then also I'm actually putting in Mechie and Hutchinson. I've given boost to them, so I get more of Mechie and Hutchinson, knowing that later, if Robert Woods is active, because I have set this salary cap, maybe I just get rid of the salary cap at that point, and they can become more Robert Woods instead.
So you're setting a max salary of 10K left on the table.
Yep, of 1,000 left on the table. So
I thought you said 49. I thought you said 49.
49,000, yeah, out of the 50,000. So I'm leaving 1,000 on the table. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. Gotcha. I think I did very shitty math in my head there. So you're going to be leaving $1,000 in salary on the table for them. So for me, because there's different ways to do it, right? There's more than one way to skin a cat. And, people all the time, they go, no, there's only one way to skin a cat. Not true. There's multiple ways. You can go back to front. You can go side to side. There's all different ways you can do it. For me, I'm just playing lineups with Robert Woods, assuming Robert Woods is in. Here's what's great about this. If Robert Woods actually ends up playing, I think he's going to be lower on than he should be relative to ownership. If Robert Woods is out, super easy to swap from Robert Woods to Mechie or to Xavier Hudson, whereas it's harder to go the other way unless you're doing what you're doing, which is making sure you leave $1,000 in salary on the table so you get that 800 to spend up. We're kind of doing something similar, but in opposite ways.
Yeah, I'm only doing it this way because I'm already testing out the leave salary on the table thing. So it's a combination of, I'm not really doing it to reserve that spot, but I'm also doing it with the knowledge that I can change things and just get back to the regular salary cap if I want to.
We've got Strammy10 in the chat says there are 11 ways to skin a cat. I'm sure people have written a book and have come up with all the different ways to skin a cat. I've brought this up on the channel before, and once somebody got very, very upset with me about it.
I remember
yeah, very. And this is, by the way, this is not like an anti-animal thing. It's more so, what is the origin of that saying and why? Because it's very disturbing if you think about it.
It is very disturbing.
You don't put a lot of thought into it. It's like, hey, multiple ways to skin a cat. And then it's, why is that a saying? Who decided this is a saying that just worked its way in everybody's vernacular and then everybody knows what it means? I'm uncomfortable with it. I don't like it. Let's see what we have. Super chat here. Anthony Maselli is asking us favorite contrarian defense and then Naji or Warren for FanDuel. So no matter which site it is, DraftKings or FanDuel, I prefer Jaylen Warren to Najee Harris. But what about yourself?
Yeah, I think I prefer, let's see, what's the ownership? We have Jalen Warren at 46%, Najee. Yeah, at that ownership, I think it is. I have a similar amount of each. I have a little bit more Jalen Warren over Najee Harris, but now that we are talking about, let me just last week Najee Harris, uh, it's tough because so last week Najee Harris 27 rushing attempts to Jalen Warren's 13, but then Jalen Warren is the one out there on passing downs. He had 65% route participation, 4 targets last week, which is an easy way to pick up some PPR points. So at ownership being so similar, it's honestly really close for me. Maybe slightly for Warren, but I think they're honestly similar.
And then the other part of the question is our favorite contrarian defense on FanDuel. So, it's kind of hard to answer that because, well, let's see, what is the ownership on? Let me pull up defense ownerships here. Defense ownership. Do you have a favorite contrarian defense, Neil?
So I'm looking at DraftKings right now, but on DraftKings, I mean, none of them are like super contrarian. So it's a little bit like the Colts are the only one under 20%. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess because they're under 20%, you consider the Colts. It's also like they have the toughest matchup against CJ Stroud, wanting to win, and the Colts are a bad defense. So I wouldn't say I love it from a contrarian standpoint. I guess the Texans on DraftKings. I was thinking the Ravens are going to be more contrarian than they are because they're not really playing their starters. But they are not contrarian. So I guess the Texans, if you got to go with one of the lower owned defenses, but nobody's that contrarian.
Yeah, that's what makes it hard is that the ownership on the defenses, and he did ask about FanDuel. I think this applies to both FanDuel and DraftKings, though, is I don't really like what are we considering even contrarian? Because on FanDuel, we have the Colts are 17% owned, the Texans are 19% owned, the Ravens are 27% owned, the Steelers are 35%. So if we're going to say, all right, Steelers and Ravens are the popular defenses, well, there's only a few ownership point difference between the Ravens and the other two defenses. In that case, I feel a little bit better about the Texans defense than the Colts defense, just because they're not playing against CJ Stroud. But right. It's a slate where it's really hard to care that much about what defense I get exposure to. Here's what I hope, because people know, if you've been watching these shows that Neil and I do together, I hate defenses. I don't want anything to do with them on DFS slates. I hope next year they finally go away. What I really just hope on the slate is that every defense scores about the same amount of fantasy points and it doesn't matter. Like, I don't want one defense to have a punt return touchdown and that's what decides the entire slate.
Agreed. We know it's not going to happen, but that's what I want also.
Yeah. And then I'm sure it's going to be first play of the game, quarterback accidentally throws the ball backwards like Mason Rudolph or something like that, and the Ravens defense picks it up and runs for a touchdown. Always ends up happening on these kind of slates. But favorite contrarian defense, I will answer the Texans.
Let me throw a name out there. I saw Nathan brought it up in chat earlier, just because we haven't really talked about the not number one wide receivers in the Colts game. I do really think Alec Pierce is pretty interesting. He's only 4,300. We're only projecting him for sub 16% ownership. And he ran 80% of the routes last week. He only had 1 target, so that's not ideal, but he's out there running the second most routes on the team behind Michael Pittman. So I just want to throw that name out there because I am playing a lot of him. So I figured I should get that out there.
He's in my player pool. He's of the running. I mean, there aren't that many. How many wide receivers are there to play in that 4K range? That's it. He's the only one. So I guess you kind of get to him by default if you have that much salary left, because he's at $4,300. The next closest guy that's above him, Neil, is Deontay Johnson at $5,100. The next closest guy below him is Robert Woods at $4,300. So there's nobody that's closer than $500 in salary to him. So if you have salary available in like that 5K range, you're playing Alec Pierce because that's really your only option. So somebody else also, by the way, if I have Robert Woods, which I do, I have Robert Woods lineups. If Woods is ruled out, some of those lineups are going to become Alec Pierce as well. That's another swap that you could potentially be making there.
True.
Next question is from 4-Prong Digger. He's asking us, Huntley and Kolar and Pittsburgh B in the same lineup. Is that okay? Yeah, I'm not worrying too much about defenses versus players they're going up against. It's impossible to avoid on a 2-game slate.
Yep. Agreed.
And also, question from Brian Berg in the YouTube chat, because you were just talking about how much you like Pierce. Are you playing Pierce more than you're playing Downs?
I am playing Pierce more than I'm playing Downs. Downs is more expensive. We've got him projected for more ownership, and he's just not really like last week. Downs ran 48% of routes. He only saw 2 targets, so one more target than Pierce. Honestly, to me, they're interchangeable as far as like spike week upside, and Pierce is getting lower ownership at a lower price tag. So I do prefer Pierce to Downs.
All right, let's see what else we have as far as questions go. Where is it? Looks like we got all the questions answered in Discord. And also, if you guys want to join the Discord channel, which I'm in there all the time now. So it's not just answering questions on shows. It's also after the shows end, particularly for NBA. I think it's really helpful to people to where any kind of news that breaks, we inform people what the news is. And then all the updates that I make to my lineups for something like NBA today, it's going to matter for Robert Woods in football. We give updates and people ask me questions in the Discord channel. So go check that out if you guys want to. The most affordable package that we have at Stokastic.com is the lineup generator, which actually, if you wouldn't mind, Jacob, can you put the lineup generator on screen? Let's build some lineups before the show ends here. Lineup generator is available for less than $15, and you could build lineups for classic slates. You can build lineups for showdown slates, for FanDuel, and for DraftKings. Build up to 20 of them, and it builds lineups for you. And you also get information in it like our projections, our ownership. So it is something here that is really, really good value, I think, of all the different tools that we have at the site. I think that the lineup generator, one of the best, especially if you're somebody who's a lower dollar player. So Jacob, let's throw the lineup generator up on screen and we'll see what kind of lineups we can build in the lineup generator. And Neil, I'm going to give you the choice here. Do we want to build, it's only a 2-game slate. Do we want to build contrarian lineups, balanced, chalky? Which way should we go?
I always struggle with this on a 2-game slate, whether I should be more contrarian, more balanced. So I usually just use the all lineups option. But if I were just choosing one, I would probably go contrarian.
All right, so let's go contrarian then. We'll go contrarian here. Contrarian lineups. And let's see what we get to. Contrarian. Damn, it's very hard to read on screen. I was hoping it was going to be easier, but just save a handful of them, Jacob, and then we'll just look at some of the exposures, and hopefully I'll be able to make my way through some of the blurriness on screen to figure out what some of the player exposures are. But I'm seeing Gardner Minshew lineup, a lot of Gardner Minshew lineups, actually, some CJ Stroud. And here we go. So overall player exposures, Michael Pittman. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. We got to get to a ton of Pittman. Neil, I assume that's the same for you. There's a lot of cheap players. You have to spend the salary somewhere. It makes sense to get to guys like Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor for that reason.
Yeah, I have a ton of Pittman, a ton of Nico Collins, a ton of Jonathan Taylor. Yeah, big part.
Okay, let's see what we have next. Nico Collins, Jonathan Taylor. That's Dalton Schultz. That makes sense as well. Gardner Minshew. So these lineups, even though we did try to build contrarian lineups here, it did give us still a lot of chalky players. But those lineups, you could get lineups that are contrarian, even if the players in those lineups themselves do have popularity. Just because if you're playing lineups where it's like, hey, if you have Naji Harris and Jaylen Warren together, yes, those players do have a decent amount of ownership individually, but there probably aren't going to be a lot of lineups with those two together. So definitely go ahead and you could consider other ways to build lineups that are contrarian outside of just which players aren't picking up a lot of ownership. So if you guys want to sign up for the lineup generator, use the link below, less than $15. Going to build lineups for you. You can upload them directly to DraftKings and/or FanDuel, wherever you're playing, and you get access as well to our Discord channel. But let's see what we have here as a super chat. Malcolm Revamp. And by the way, a lot of people supporting Neil in the YouTube channel. Here's a great way to support Neil. We've got it pinned at the top of YouTube here. Go fund. By the way, Neil's going to be around. Neil and I are going to be doing this show together for the foreseeable future as well. So if you guys want to check Neil, he'll be on our YouTube channel. But he also has his YouTube channel that you guys could check him out and get best ball content from. And that is pinned. I put a message in here and it is now pinned. So click on that. Go to Neil's YouTube channel. You could subscribe. Malcolm Revamp wants to know, what are the cash game defenses for DraftKings and FanDuel? I mean, trying to figure out who to play in cash games for defense, Neil. This is a tough chore. But is there a defense you look at and you feel like better about than the other defenses?
For cash games, I think we can rule out the Texans and the Colts just because they both need to win. Probably Steelers. Yeah, the Steelers are the chalk defense, and they are playing against the backup Ravens. So I think the Steelers are probably the cash defense. Do you agree?
I'm most inclined to just say whoever has the most ownership which is the Steelers.
Yeah.
I mean, if one defense is going to be 40% owned in a cash game, like I have no real good lean for defense. I'll be completely honest with that. So I just say go play the one that is the most ownership and align yourself with the field. That is the Steelers.
Yep. Same page.
Yeah. So that's the way that I'm going to go ahead and say that we should do that. Only a few minutes left to go. This went a lot faster for a 2-game slate than I was thinking it was going to go. Let me make sure. Oh, here we go. We got a super chat from McStars Online. Just got here, is likely playing today. Likely is going to play today. He hasn't been ruled out. I'm skeptical how much he plays, though.
Agreed. 100%. Yeah. I don't think he plays the whole game. Like I said, I think that they should be playing to lose this game, to not have to face the Bills, but you never really know. Like, coaches are just, they're competitive. He might want to win, in which case maybe likely's out there longer, but I think they have Super Bowl aspirations. Likely probably not going to play a ton.
All right, let's see what else we have in Discord here. We've got all right, so somebody's wondering, why is it, Neil, that you think the Ravens would try to lose today? It was something you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, so they are likelier to not have to face the Bills early if they lose this game. If the Steelers win this game, they are likelier to have to face the Bills later, not until the conference championship. So they don't really have incentive. And they also they have zero incentive to win the game. Like they've already locked up the bye. So they don't really have incentive to play their regular starters. And then they are probably better off in the playoffs if they lose the game.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like the players are going to go out and they're going to be like, ah, shit, we got the players are still playing. Like Tyler Huntley is playing to keep his NFL career. But as far as the Ravens, they're playing their backups because their priority as an organization is to play ahead for the playoffs. So that's why we're going to be seeing backups playing today, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the Ravens players are just going to pack it in. They're just playing the suboptimal players for today. And good question by Sean Preston. Wants to know, are other positions like offensive line, defensive line, is that also going to be the backups? My understanding is that there's going to be some starters like Isaiah Likely that could go out and play, like a few snaps, but like even the offensive and defensive line, I expect that to primarily be backups as well. Is that where you are at as well?
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting, at least for most of the game.
Let's see, just about 90 seconds left to go here, Neil. Do you have any other thoughts on the slate? Anything we haven't covered?
Not really. I mean, as we've said multiple times, the Steelers need to win this game, which probably means they want to give the ball to the running backs. But if the Ravens do get off to a big start, maybe they're forced to throw a little bit more. And even Mason Rudolph maybe can get the ball to Deontay Johnson a number of times. He should be targeted heavily. So I do like Deontay Johnson quite a bit as well. I feel like we've talked about all of the more unique plays on the slate that I have interest in. Man, I thought I was done crunching, and I just see now that I have 31% Justice Hill, which I was intending to get like a Justice Hill lineup, and it has been volatile. No, I think that we've covered all the most interesting bits of the game.
All right, guys, that is going to do it for us because we're at lock. If you haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We got NBA Live Before Lock later on today in about an hour and a half here. So if you're looking for NBA content, go check that out, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you back here later. Peace out.